but we had the whole family here, which was very nice. And so here we are. Good. All right. So not too many readers this evening, but we do have some very, very excellent ones. That's myself and Jack. Okay. And so I'll be doing some reading. And Jack, I understand that you were in the United States for several years. So whilst you are muted, I will take that as a yes. So that's why your English is fine. If you'd like to read, Jack, you'll have to unmute. Okay.
Have you got some page for me?
Absolutely. Okay. Good.
Good.
So, yeah, Jack, we'll
Okay.
have that American side of you
Right.
come out.
The world is freed from the domination of harsh din on Shabbos. According to the Talmud, Sanhedrin 65b, and the Midrash Sinclair Rabbati 23, the fires of Gehinnom cease on Shabbos, but the Zohar extends this idea to the abolition of the entire rule of harsh judgment in the world.
And this is the typical move in the Zohar. We have a slim hint. The Sugya and Sanhedrin deals with Elisha ben Abuya. Elisha ben Abuya, or Acher, became a heretic, and his grave would burst into flames right through the week. But come Friday, with sundown, the flames would die down. So the Gemara asks about this phenomenon, and it explains that the fires of Gehinnom, in which, of course, Elisha ben Abuya had to burn because of his apikorsut, well, they cease on Shabbat. So it's like a one-liner in the Gemara. Similarly, in the Midrash, it's a couple of lines. But the Zohar builds a whole world on this. So I will read, Bahadein Yoma Chiyavaya de Gehinom Naichin. On this day of Shabbat, all those who are in Gehinom, they rest. They're not being burned. Bahadein Yoma Kol Dinin It Kafyan V'la Mit'arin Ba'alma. And on this day, all the evil cohorts of the Sitra Achra are subdued, and they do not rise up and influence the world. Bahadein Yoma Chedvata V'tafnuka or Tifnuka Ishtamea B'matan V'chamshin Almin. And on this day, joy and Tafnuka is like Tinuk. Okay, we talk about it in Hebrew, to be spoiled. Have a nice time. But think of Mayididut V'tafnu Kei Ma'adanim B'chol Shalosh Pa'amim. So we have tasty treats 3 times on Shabbat. And that is the phenomenon of the 250 worlds. Well, this is another Kabbalistic idea. There are 248 worlds because Adam HaKadmon, that primordial man, has got how many limbs? Reish Mem Chet. What's Reish Mem Chet? 248. And you add to that the 2 Sfirot of Tiferet and Malchut, which are united on Shabbat, you get 250. Tachazi. B'chol shita yoma deshabta kazmata shata dislota demincha. On every day of the week when mincha time comes, dina takefa shalta. Then harsh din reigns. B'chol dinin mitarin, and all the evil cohorts, they come to life. Aval b'yom deshabta kazmata eidan dislota demincha, rava deravya nishtaka. But on Mincha on Shabbat, there's no harsh din, no harsh judgment in the world. And then the Rava de Ravyan, Ratzon Haratzonot, the will of all wills, which is actually the sphere of Keter, Va'atika Kadisha, and this is Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Galia Ratzon Delay. The will of the Keter and of the Kadosh Baruch Hu prevails over the Sitra Achra. V'chol dinin mit kaifan, and all the evil cohorts are subdued. U'mishtakach ravata v'chedva b'chula, and pleasure and joy are everywhere. Ovahai ratzon nistalek Moshe Neviah mehemna the Kadisha Be'alma. When did Moshe Rabbeinu pass away? Milcha time on Shabbat. Begin the minda de la bedina stalik, to tell you that, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu would never have had a harsh judgment against him. So when he died at Mincha time, Shabbat Mincha is an exception to the rule. Va'ishata b'ratzon datika kadisha nafak nishmatei ve'it tamar bey. And his soul departed on that occasion on Shabbat afternoon. V'din ala shalta bey. Of course, there is no dinin prevailing against Moshe Rabbeinu. Zakachol kei de Moshe. Typical Zoharic move. Blessed this is the merit. May we all have the merit of Moshe. Kol karuza nafik. And then there is a voice that comes out and says, Itaru Kiddishe Elyonin, Itaru Ama Kadisha. The holy ones on high are the Sfirot. They come to life. And then also, down in this world, we, the Jewish people, Israel, come to life. Lehit Orer, Ditchablu Le'elavatata. And thereby we join the upper and the lower realms. This is the consistent theme of the Zohar. Itaru chedvata lekadmut ma'arichon, and the pleasure and the joy out of the union arises and is favorable in the eyes of their master. Mare delachon, their master. Itaru bechedvata shleimata, it is a complete joy. Izdamnu betlat chedvan detlat avahan. And we have the three meals, of course, and the three Avot, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov correspond to Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferet. Izdamnu lekadmut mehemunuta dechedva dechol chedvata. And this is the joy of all joys. Zakah chol kon Yisrael kadishin v'al madenu v'al madati. Same thing, we Israelites who do this properly, well, we have great merit in this world and in the next. Dahava yaruta lochon mikol amim of de avodat kochavim. The Shabbat, therefore, is given to us as the Jewish people. Gentiles have no part of it. Okay, velona tato legoye haratzot, as we say in every Aminda on Shabbat morning. You didn't give it as a portion to the non-Jews. Al daktiv beini uvein bnei Israel. Briti, it's the beini between me and bnei Israel. That is a whole constellation of the Sfirot. Is influenced by the Jewish people who keep Shabbat. We bring harmony into the world and we make God real. Okay? So this is the job we have. It's an amazing and a magnificent job. Okay? So this is the idea. Jack, we're over to you, please. The difference between
the standard halachic approach to Shabbat and the Zoharic one is brought out nicely in the different preparatory passages recited on Erev Shabbat in the Ashkenazi and Hasidic Sephardi rites, respectively. Ashkenazim and many Sephardim recite the second chapter of Tractate Shabbos Bamemadikin, which deals with the types of oils and wicks to be used for the Shabbat candles and focuses on avoiding activities which will break the laws of Shabbos concerning burning and extinguishing a flame. The Hasidic Sephardic ritual of Erev Shabbos includes a passage from the Zohar, Kigavna, which deals with the secret power of Shabbos to unify the Sfirot in the upper realm, the role of Israel to signify this union in the lower one, and the power of Shabbos to remove the dominion of harsh things.
So we have two different ways of welcoming Shabbat or thinking about Shabbat as it comes in. There's the halachic one. Careful which wicks you use in your oil lamp. Careful which types of oil you use. Some oils you can't use, some oils you can. You mustn't incline the wick because then you'd be doing melechet mav'ir, and etc., etc. Whereas the Hasidic and some of the Sephardim talk about the ideas we've just been talking about. They say Shabbat is a wonderful occasion on which we can have experience a different world, at all levels, our personal, familial, communal level, and we can influence what happens on high. So which would you go for? Kegavna. I'm going to give you a quick English translation of Kegavna. By the way, is John here? No. He had trouble with his mic, I think. Anyhow, hopefully he is okay, because I saw him. Yael, Jean was here, right?
I think he used Michelin's
headset.
iPad, but I'm not sure.
Okay, because perhaps he had a problem. Anyhow,
Yeah.
so I mean, many of us have said have been in shul when Kegavna has been said. I know it's certainly not said in Switzerland, I'm sure, unless you go to the Hasidim. Okay, but this is what Kegavna is all about. Kegavna, just as, and now I'll say the inu mitachadin le'ela be'echad. The highest sfirot unify. Af hachi ihi itchadata natata. So the lower world, that's us, we unify. Tiferet Malchut. Baraza de'echad, in the secret of unity. So there's unity up in the Sefirot, and there's unity down in this world. And we create one unified God's presence, which is often Tiferet. But Tiferet has to be united with Malchut, as we've learned. That's what we achieve. And that's why we feel different. When we go into Shabbat, we can almost feel it in a palpable way. Joy descends. Something very special happens. Harmony descends. Unity descends. Forget about the oil and the wicks. Think about the feeling of Shabbat. Now, up in heaven, the highest presence of God, what we call the small face, the Sfirot, 7 Sfirot, cannot sit on the throne until the secret of unity has taken place. The secret unity has taken place. One below, one above. This is the secret of God being one, His name is one. That is, we bring about the unity of Tiferet and Malchut. Raza de Shabbati Shabbat itchadata baraza de echad lemishrei Allah raza de echad. And we all feel the presence of that mystical unity. Tzlota, the prayer, Tzlota is Aramaic for prayer, the Male Shabbat on Friday night, the Ha'itchadata kursaya kira kadisha baraza de echad. As we pray, we say Baruch Hu, as we're placing the Godhead on the throne in heaven. Now, can you imagine that? That's what we're doing on a Friday night when we say Baruch Hu. V'itkanata lemishrei Allah malka kadisha ilah kad ayil shabta. When Shabbat comes in, itchadata v'itparashta misitra achra. Then the sitra achra flees, runs away. Shabbat is too much for it. V'chol dinim mitabri mina, and all the evil cohorts disappear. Ve'ishtarat bichuda dinihiru kadisha, and the light of the Holy One, blessed be He, shines over all. V'tatra b'chameitrin legabe malka kadisha, and the robes of the Holy One are given about to all of us. V'chol shultani rugzin omari dedina kul arkin. The word arika, orek, is a deserter. Okay, it's Aramaic, and this is arkin. All the dinin, all the demons, all Lilith and her cohorts, all run away because the light of God is too strong. Okay, and then the Sitra Achra is defeated in all worlds. And there is a light that comes from above, and extends below and gives the form to the creatures in this world. And we all get a new soul, neshama yetera, kedein sheruta ditzlota, lavarcha benihiru da'anpin, and as we are about to say Baruch Hu, and begin to pray with joy and shiny faces. So, I'm going to tell you that years ago, when I came to Israel as a student and as a Bachur Yeshiva, I had quite a bit to do with the seminar Torani, the Bnei Akiva seminar in Europe. Chanichim for all Europe came. So when I eventually arrived in Israel, I knew quite a few shlichim and rabbanim, and I went to most of the kibbutzim of Tzionut Hadatit, Yavne, Shuchot, Ein HaNatziv, etc. Now, I also went to Kfar Etzion, and I was surprised to discover that whilst Kibbutz Hadati in general follows Nusach Ashkenaz, and many Yekes came to found the Kibbutz Hadati, that makes sense, Kfar Etzion had Nusach Sfard, what we call Nusach Sfard, which is in fact Nusach Ari, the Hasidic Nusach in Europe, became Ashkenaz Winat Israel. And in Kfar Etzion, there was something called Hanan Porat. And I asked him why in Kfar Etzion they have Nusach Sfard, they say Kegavna. Everywhere else in Kibbutz Hadati movement, it's Nusach Ashkenaz and Bameh Madikin. So what he told me was similar to something I saw very recently, so I've given it in his name. I'm going to read this out to you, and then you'll tell me what you think, okay? Musupar, there is a story, it is told, of the Kuach ben Chasid lemitnaged. A Chasid and a Misnagid, okay, are arguing. B'sheila, ma rawi lomar be'erev Shabbat lifnei Baruch Hu. What should we say before Baruch Hu? Amar hamitz naged. You all know what a misnaged is, I assume. Okay? He says, V'shal shani omer b'mem madikin, ani lomed lefachot perek mishnayot meilchot Shabbat. I learn a perek of Mishnah about Shabbat, u'mishtadel la'avin et hanemar bo. And I try to understand. Ve'ilu ata, and you, the chosid, ta omer kegavna, bli la'avin af milah. The truth is, you don't understand a single word. And that's as we said last time, Ian Taylor, I think, said, he doesn't understand a single word. Who does? We just did explain, we explained to Governor, but most people who say don't understand the word. So the Chassid answered and said, Odeh al ha'emet. You know what? I will admit to the truth. I really don't understand the words. But when I say kegavna, ani chash meshek mashak kanfei malachim slivi. I can feel the beating of angels' wings around me. I'm transported to a world of spirituality, of heaven, of sfirot. Bilu and you, ha'omer b'ameh madikin, v'osek bezefet u'v'shava. What are you talking about? Pitch and tar, b'shem and kick, cottonseed oil, u'v'chelev, and fat, which is cooked. That takes you to your factory, to your shop. You're thinking about your business. And you're totally absorbed in the world of chulin. Or at least I get a taste of spirituality. That's more or less what Hanan Porat said. He said, granted, most people who say Kegavna don't know the Zohar well, don't understand the concepts, couldn't explain to you what the three avuhon are, or what the why there are no rugs in the Marin, even if they know what that phrase means. But they feel enveloped by something spiritual. Whereas the Misnagdim read the Mishnah, they start thinking about oils and wicks and zefet and shava. They're transported to their factory or their shop, where they have their pitch and their tar, and then you're thinking about everyday affairs. So I leave that to you to ponder on. Harvey, are you there? Can you unmute? Harvey. Okay. Yes or no?
Yes,
or no?
I am here. I am here.
Great,
I was
Harvey.
just, yeah, I'm here.
Can I
Okay,
ask
sorry.
you to read?
Yeah,
Would you like to
absolutely, you
read?
can. Where are we up to? Understanding yes, I would. Understanding
Line
mitzvot
5.
from a non-rational perspective. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Understanding mitzvot from a
mitzvot.
non-rational. Understanding mitzvot from a non-rational perspective, rather than a rational one, has its roots in the traditional distinction made by the sages between chukim and mishpatim.
Okay. So what
This
we've really
distinction was
just a second, Harvey. We prepared ourselves for
okay.
the fact that non-rational is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, that whilst Maimonides was an extreme case of rationality, there's definitely an irrational side, and it's not such a bad thing. It speaks to a very important part of our spirituality. And Chazal made a distinction between chukim and mishpatim. This is very standard. This distinction, Harvey, please.
This distinction was preserved in medieval Jewish rationalist theology. The prime example being Rav Sadia Gaon's categories of mitzvot shemiyot.
Yeah, good.
The mitzvot
sikliot. So there are rational ones we can understand, and there are things that we have to accept because they're part of the tradition. Maimonides
famously departed from this view and proclaimed that all mitzvot can be explained rationally. The sages only made a distinction for the sake of the common folk who were unable to grasp the rationality behind the so-called chukim.
Now, we learned this when we're studying the Moreh Nevuchim. Rambam is very adamant that every mitzvah has a reason. Even if it's called a chok, it does have a reason. Now, the problem with this
highly rational approach, of course, was the temptation to cease observing mitzvot on the grounds that their rational goals could be achieved without actual performance.
In other words, when Rambam talks about prayer, if you remember, he says, well, korbanot. He begins with korbanot and says they are really there to help us survive in a period where you could only serve God with sacrifices and get to a period where you could get close to God by praying and fasting. But are praying and fasting the end result? Is this what God wants us to do? Actually, they're only tools. They help us focus our minds. They help us concentrate. We're encouraged to develop tremendous knowledge and understanding. And really, it will appear that the best and purest service of God is with the mind only, and not even with the lips or with depriving the body of food and drink. Now, Rambam himself says that this will be very difficult in his time, certainly for even the most rational of his co-religionists. But the problem that arises with this is that once you let the cat out of the bag and you say that tefillah is there to help you refine your mind, concentrate your intellect, and progress in an abstract way, why do you need to daven at all, and why would you need to fast? Okay, if there are only tools to help you on the way, if there are means and not the final end. So that there was a phenomenon of rational, philosophically minded Jews in Spain, for example, becoming fairly lax with practical mitzvot, tefillah, shacharit, mincha, Ma'ariv, and without making this point at the same level of what I've just said in Spain, but it's well known that Reb Chaim Soloveitchik of Brisk only went to Minyan when there was a Kriyat HaTorah, only when they learned. Otherwise, he stayed home and learned. For him, the most sublime spiritual activity was the intellectual experience of Torah study, and there was no need for so much attention to daven with a minyan, for example. Now, of course, he davened, and davened at the right time. But in Spain, many of the rational philosophical types became fairly lax in terms of practical mitzvot. At the end of the day, when the decree of expulsion or converting to Catholicism happened in 1492, the following observation was made by Rabbi Yosef Yavetz, and we actually read this, Hasid Yavetz, okay, who was Spanish and, of course, left Spain and went to Italy, but he was a famous darshan, pietist, encouraging people in his sermons to become more observant, and he wrote a fairly blistering critique of the Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed. So, Harvey, can I please have you from the word indeed on line 13?
Indeed, medieval pietists such as Rav Yosef Yavetz wrote in his Orach Chaim, Chassid Yavetz, Spain, 1440 to 1508, wrote in his Orach Chaim that the GP,
Guide for the Perplexed.
Guide
for the Perplexed.
The Guide for the Perplexed was the source of the lax observance of mitzvot in his time, and famously observed that it was the philosophically inclined Spanish Jews who converted to Catholicism at the time of the expulsion, whereas the simple folk clung to their ancestral faith and suffered the hardships of exile in order to preserve their traditional way of life.
Now, he, of course, was referring to the simple folk who were very attached to the Kabbalistic interpretations of mitzvot and of the Zohar in general, and even they didn't understand the Zohar. They read the Zohar, they applied it as much as they could, and they were not prepared to give up their observance of mitzvot. And that's because Kabbalah, especially the Zohar, did something entirely different to the trend to rationalize Judaism that was so profound and so ubiquitous in the Middle Ages prior to the expulsion from Spain. Because the more you become philosophical, the more you interpret things in terms of a different end or goal, the less you're going to be concerned with keeping every jot and tittle, every minor detail of the law. The Kabbalah does the opposite. It says every single detail of the law, even the one that you regard as being highly insignificant, like the hair on your tefillin box, carries huge significance. So therefore, you would be much more inclined to observe every single law and custom because of its Kabbalistic significance. And that explains why that Kabbalah and that Zohar gave rise to the Hasidic movement, which sees in practical halakha a mystical experience. Okay, every single thing that you touch in practical halakha is suffused with mysticism, especially the mundane things. Yes, you eating and you're drinking, the 3 meals on Shabbat, shalosh seudos, sexual relations on Friday night. Every single thing that you look at, the wearing of tefillin, wearing of tzitzit, putting up of a mezuzah, and kissing the mezuzah in order to ensure protection for yourself and everybody in your house. Well, you would do that too, right? If you believed in it. Rambam says, of course not. It's idolatry to believe that your mezuzah is going to save your life or the life of your family. But you can understand the attraction of the former Kabbalistic point of view. Everything counts. Everything counts. So, the Kabbalist on the other hand, I don't know, I have 2 names I see. Michelin's iPad, I think maybe Jean. It would be nice if he would say so. Walter Rosenbaum, I don't know whether you're into reading. Or even if you're there, but you'd have to unmute. And who is RJ7E0P? Would anybody like to unmute and step up to the reading plate? If not, then we will go back to Jack. Line 19, 4. Thank you, Harvey. The Kabbalists.
The Kabbalists, on the other hand, viewed all mitzvot from a mystical perspective and regarded each and every one as a building block in the process of bringing about harmony in this spherotic realm and hence perfection to the world. From their perspective, it would be unthinkable to downgrade the practice of mitzvot since they are the theurgic
iconography. You'll excuse me for using a technical term in the academic study of mysticism, but theurgic is when you turn to something spiritual to actually have an effect. Okay? You're not simply being spiritual and say, I'm putting on tefillin because I'm going to achieve a result. Iconography, icon is an image or is a religious object. Every religious object you touch, talis, tefillin, your tefillin bag, they all have mystical significance. So therefore, you're careful with them. You give them as much attention as you can. And that is the great contribution, if you like, of Kabbalah, of the Zohar, to the practice of mitzvot. And if you do those things with the right kavanah, that makes a good life possible in this world. And it's not for nothing that Hillel Zeitlin, the famous Rebbe, okay, in the Warsaw Ghetto, when he was pulled out by the Nazis, appeared with his talis, his tefillin, and a copy of the Zohar under his arm. Did that change his fate? No. How did he feel? He felt very different. He felt like a hero. Hillel Zeitlin, and we've talked about him before. So the mystical approach to mitzvot, Jack, please.
The mystical approach to mitzvot is found in the early Heralot literature in the 12th and 13th centuries. Kabbalists in Provence and Spain wrote extensively on this topic. Rabbi Isaac the Blind,
Rabbi Yitzchak Sagi Nahor, who is his father? Anybody remember? The Ravid, Rabbi Avraham ben David, the famous Ravid on the Rambam. One of his sons was blind, Yitzchak Sagi Nahor, and he became a very eminent Kabbalist, devoted
an entire work to the Kabbalistic reasons for the commandments. The practice of mitzvot directly affects the world of the Sfirot, and each and every mitzvah has a role in completing the image of Adam HaKadmon, and thereby completing the throne of the divine glory.
So each mitzvah affects a different limb, a different organ. We have 250 worlds, and the image of Adam HaKadmon is again something that the Zohar does, very graphic. The Godhead, that is the way that the God is represented, is by the limbs and the organs and the parts of a man, all right? So we see this in other mystical systems as well. We know, I think it was Leonardo da Vinci, the famous image of a man with his arms outspread, the legs are apart, and they all correspond to something spiritual and of a religious nature. So we are, as it were, making God by doing the mitzvot, completing the throne. And when it says in Kegavla Kursaya Yakira Kadisha, the Kursa, we use that term in, it's Aramaic, of course, in modern Hebrew, for a settee or a sofa. Kursa, armchair. This is God's throne. We, by doing mitzvot and fulfilling every single detail, are building with our hands and our mouths and our tongues, we are building God's throne. And then Hayah Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz v'yomer Hashem echad u'shmo echad. That's a very powerful idea. Now, to believe in it, of course, you have to be a believer. But you can understand that once you are a believer, the idea of not being very particular with any slight little part of a halakha, mitzvah, or even minhag would be unthinkable, as opposed to the rationalist who is prepared to say with Rambam, look, these things are only means to an end. If I can get to the end, I can play a little fast and loose with the means. As I said, lahavdil elef havdalot, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, Reb Chaim Brisker, would stay home and learn, because for him, that was absolute pure spirituality. Okay? Now, anyone who subtracts, Jack, please.
Indeed, the 10 Commandments will include all the mitzvot correspond to the 10 Sfirot.
So, of
Anyone-
course, why are there 10 commandments? Because there are 10 Sfirot. Obvious, right? Did you ever hear that before? No. But that is what a mystic believes with his full or her full heart. Okay? The 10 commandments are in fact representations of the 10 Sfirot, and all the mitzvot are included in these 10 commandments. So every mitzvah, every detail of a mitzvah is helping to combine the Sfirot and bring about these divine unities. Anyone
who subtracts even one mitzvah harms the divine image and brings ruin to the world.
So I've given you the sources in the Zohar. We're not going to read every single source. We don't have time. But you can check them all if you're so inclined. The Zoharic concept.
The Zoharic concept is an activist one in which the doer of a mitzvah or an avera affects the entire cosmos in a mystical manner.
And by the way, if you think about Chabad, very similar. A Jewish soul, born Jewish, does a mitzvah, doesn't understand anything about the mitzvah, but you wrap tefillin around the arm of a Jewish man and put it on his head, you're producing a change in the world of the Sefirot, and you are hopefully making this world a better place. So that's why they do it. Okay?
One
One
mitzvah can tip the scales in favor of the triumph of the good. One avera can do the same for Sitra Achra. Sinners drive the Shekhinah away and open the way for Lilith and her consort.
Cohorts, tzvaot, the cohorts, armies to reign in the world.
Oh, lost place.
Okay, line 35, everything.
Everything that happens in the lower world has an effect on the upper one, and a good deed in this world brings about harmony in the celestial realm. In a particular daring statement, the Zohar declares that anyone who breaks a single commandment of the Torah is considered as if he has committed an assault on the body of the king.
Now that's, again,
The struggle
I'm sure that Jean would be shocked. Body of the king, God has anything to do with a body? But the Zohar is very direct, okay? The king, the throne, and this is not only one, this is the different combinations of the Sfirot, but he wants you to feel that you are responsible for God in this world in a direct way. Things you do, mundane things, mitzvot that are to do with all sorts of things that we do every day, brachot, tefillot, eating kosher, all of that is going to do a lot more than simply, rationally speaking, make you more disciplined or incline you to more spiritual things. The struggle to overcome the Sitra Achra, and it's a fight every day. You get up in the morning and you got to fight, okay? The struggle to overcome the Sitra Achra. Line 39.
The struggle to overcome the Sitra Achra is a feature of the search for the reasons behind the commandments, and it takes place at more than one level. Some mitzvot are aimed directly at defeating Satan, whereas others are presented as attempts to appease the forces of evil.
And we talked about the hair on the tefillin, right?
Right.
And the scapegoat and the eglah arufah. So everything you do is loaded with mystical significance. So, in the words of Gershom Scholem,
Gershom Scholem, the pioneering scholar of the Kabbalah, the holy deed, the performance of mitzvot, and even the practice of traditional religious custom is replete with mystical significance and has a profound effect upon the world. In effect, Kabbalists turned Judaism into a mystical faith.
Okay, so that is in fact my concluding line for this series. The world of the Zohar, the Kabbalists, and in particular the Zohar, turned Judaism into a mystical faith. You can read this in German.
Tradition und Neuschöpfung im Ritus des Kabbalisten Uranus Jahrbuch 19. Connecting
Okay.
connecting
Now, tradition is clear. What is Neues Schöpfung?
the new
To
creation.
schaffen. It's the new creation or the recreation of the tradition and recreation in the Kabbalistic rite. Okay, so here this is Gershom Scholem, by the way, was quite an amazing man. He was, of course, as they all were, born into a traditional family, had a good traditional education. Berlin, 1897, died in 1982 in Jerusalem. But he decided that whereas in his time all Wissenschaft des Judentums was of a rational or historical nature, the field of Jewish mysticism, Zohar Kabbalah, had been neglected. It was a very important part of the Jewish experience and therefore to be studied just as we study Saadia Gaon and Rambam and Mendelssohn and the rest. We should study mystical sources. And he worked hard. He became a professor of Jewish mysticism at the Hebrew University. He assembled texts in the National Library after the Shoah. Many mystical texts were lost or were destroyed. He went to Europe. He searched in libraries and all over to try and assemble the biggest library of mystical literature, which he did in the National Library in Jerusalem. Okay, his PhD was in the Sefer HaBahir, and he was part of a whole chevra. Martin Buber, Chaim Nachman Bialik, Shai Agnon, Achad Ha'am, and Zalman Shazar were all there at the time, and he became a Zionist. He went on Aliyah in 1923, and he basically was the first to write seriously about the mystical aspects of Judaism. And it is to Gershom Scholem that we owe a great debt of gratitude for having systematized and made Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism into an academic discipline. So I will read 5. I think that'll get us, well, somewhat towards the end. Thank you, Jack. Connecting all the mitzvot to the mystical underpinnings is clearly beyond the scope of this shiur. All right? We've given the general idea, but I'm going to give you a few examples. Classic example of a chok is a red heifer, paraduma. According to Chazal, even King Solomon did not understand the reason for this mitzvah, but the Zohar explains that this was because he was an expert analyst of Torah, that he lacked the ability to plumb its mystical depths. Zohar is very critical of those who have no time for the mystical side of Judaism, says that's why they have problems. So Shlomo HaMelech didn't understand paraduma. So the Zohar explains it and says, well, we have a combined phenomenon of Shekhinah and Sitra Achra. They do share the stage somewhat, okay? So therefore, the paradox of the paraduma, hamataher et ha-tameh, hamatameh et ha-tahor, Kabbalistically works quite well because it gives room for the Sitra Achra. The Sitra Achra and Kudsha Berichu, they dwell, as it were, in one dimension, and you can have something, and the red heifer is the prime example of the combination of those two things. Okay? The Kudsha Berichu, the Sitra Achra. So it's not a paradox that it is Matameh et Tahor, Tahor et Hatameh. This is the essence of what spirituality is about. There's a mixture of the two things always. And the phenomenon that seems to be the most tahor can be containing some tumah, and that which seems most tameh can have inside it great tahara. We know that. And that is the lesson of the paraduma. Now it all makes perfect sense. Well, according to the Kabbalah, anyhow. B. Zohar recognizes the rational basis for tzedakah. Now, it's okay if you want to say to support the poor. That's a wonderful thing. But explains that the real reason for the mitzvah is to combine Tiferet, the charity giver, with Malchut, the charity receiver. Tiferet, the giver, is male, and Malchut, the receiver, is female. By giving and receiving tzedakah in this world, Tiferet and Malchut are combined in the Sephirotic world, divine flow of goodness into the universe. Pashtaist, do you understand? When you give tzedakah, you're doing a Kabbalistic act. You're combining the giver, the receiver, the male, the female, Tiferet, and Malchut. So you wonder why the Hasidim are going around in davening, shaking their hands with all that silver, jiggling. Well, for them, it's like davening. It could be regarded as being on the same level as davening. Mitzvah Tefillin is replete with mystical significance. Head Tefillin is Tiferet, that's male. Hand Tefillin is Malchut, it's female. Mystical significance in the leather, the batim, the straps, the knots, the tuft of hair on the Shel Rosh Bait, the letter Shin. According to the one view in the Zohar, the 4 chapters inside Tefillin correspond to Chokmah, Binah, Tiferet, and Malchut, okay? Which is the entire realm of Atzilut, the upper Sephirotic realm. Pervasive theme in the Zohar's interpretation of Tefillin is the parallel between human Tefillin and those worn by Kadosh Baruch Hu. We talked about that. God's Tefillin. Donning of the head on the arm, Tefillin symbolize the union of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah. Tiferet and Malchut and the motions employed in donning the Tefillin are likened to the embraces involved in the Sephirotic union. Sephirotic and erotic are never far away from each other. Okay? So the movements you make are like an embrace, and the kissing of the tefillin, all of this in the hands of the Zohar and Kabbalah becomes the act of union. So you might spend a lot of time putting on your tefillin if you were a mystic. Most of us rush through and don't give it much of a second thought, right? If we admit the truth. D. Tzitzit. A wealth of mystical law in relation to tzitzit, which symbolizes Malchut because of the blue thread, the color which stands for Din. The white thread symbolizes Rachamim. The tzitzit is a combination of Malchut and Rachamim, Din and Rachamim. The white is there. So, okay. E. The Zohar is critical. This is a nice passage. Zohar is critical of those who ignore the mystical nature of mitzvot and focus only on their halachic aspects. Zohar says, you know what? Those who only think about halakha are missing a huge chunk of what it is to be Jewish. Zohar and the Raya Mehemna, the faithful shepherd, Moshe Rabbeinu, interprets the pasuk in which Moses and Memriva criticize the people and call them morim. You may remember Moshe and Aaron are very angry, and they say, Shimuna hamorim. Listen, you morim. Can we take water out of the rock? Apologize for the typos here. It shouldn't be nut. Whoops, it should be na. Let's go back to where we were. Okay, so Shimuna Hamorim. Shimuna Hamorim Haminasela Hazenotzilachen Mayim. Okay, so Moshe gathers all the people. There's a rock. They want water to come out of the rock. Moshe is angry and says to them, listen, you Morim, which is normally interpreted as rebels. According to the Zohar, the word Morim, which is normally translated as rebels, but can also mean teachers, Moreh Horah, okay? Mori, Moreh, Morah, refers to the rabbis who only see Torah's Talmud and Halakha and reject the secret law. So this is the Zohar harping on a theme it does. If you do not pay attention to the deep mystical meanings, you're losing a large part of what Judaism is. Their Torah is rock hard, cannot yield much water. With the right treatment, If you're not a moreh, but you are a mukubal, the rock can be handled in such a way that produces a mighty stream of water, which is, of course, the secret wisdom of the Kabbalah. In other words, without the Kabbalah, the performance of mitzvot becomes dry and desiccated as a stone, leaving the souls untouched and uninspired. Goes back to what Hanan Porat said. Well, you can say Bameh Madikin, but it mightn't raise your spirits. You say Kegavna, you feel touched by the wings of angels, even though you don't understand a single word. And this brings me to the last source in this course, which is actually a line we read from Rabbi Dr. Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Herzog, okay? Bad Bavad, after Rabbi Herzog talked about the fact that the Zohar is probably not the work of Rashbi, only a tiny fraction, maybe, and many of the doctrines of the Zohar are very uncomfortable for us and make us feel not quite balanced and happy. But at the same time, we should not ignore the fact that the wisdom of the mystical side will give a tam, and you know what a tam is in Yiddish, okay? You get a tam. It makes it attractive. It makes it a pleasure. It makes the doing of mitzvot an act which has special pleasure, special joy, significance. We're doing something really important. And when you feel deeply committed to Torah because of the mystical aspect to it, that gives you joy and happiness. All you need is to do the mitzvot because you're achieving so much. Your wealth and your success, well, they're nice, but they do not replace the personal and inner joy of performing a mitzvah. So you see Hasidim buying an etrog. And you remember the film Ushpizin. Remember? So it's only an etrog, okay? It's fruit, and there's a mitzvah. But if you think of all the mystical law and all the Kabbalah associated with the etrog, from the Kahal Tapuchim, the field of etrogim that we talked about, the pre-Gan Eden, the fruit of Gan Eden, bringing together Tiferet and Malchut and producing harmony in the upper realm and the lower. Well, that makes etrog really special. And that would make you spend 1,000 shekel on an etrog, okay? And this is what I guess Rabbi Herzog is getting at. כי מטרתה היא שהאדם הישראלי יקיים המצוות מתוך שמחה פנימית. We want, says Rabbi Herzog, Jews to keep mitzvot because of an inner joy. Just to go through the motions, mitzvot anashim melumada, is deadening, desiccating. זה יקל הרבה כשהאדם יודע את הטעם למה הוא נצטווה לעשות כך וכך, ובמיוחד טעם מסתורי. When you have a mystical reason and a mystical world out there, and you are participating in it, then you are very special. And you feel that you're special, and things you do are very special. And that is the secret of the success of the Kabbalah. And that's why the Zohar is Zohar HaKadosh. That's it. Folks, I'm going to take off the stop share. And anybody want to comment on that? Shmuley, do you have something to say?
I wasn't sure what the initials GP stood for.
Guide for the Perplexed.
Oh, I see. I thought it was General Practitioner or Grand Prix.
Yeah, but it's Guide
Apart
for
from
the
that,
Perplexed.
it's all clear.
Okay, so I think that this really is the sort of the crowning point of what it means. We've only skimmed the surface. The Zohar is a whole world, and then afterwards we have the Kabbalah of the Ari. How many of us, people like us, want to take on all of that? Probably very few, because these are very difficult ideas, and you have to create a whole world which we can't see, taste, touch, or feel. But I think that we all, having learned these shiurim, see how the Zohar has influenced and how it's added a dimension of joy. Sukkot would not be the same without the Ushpizin, would it? Our children come home from Gan and from school even with the pictures of the Ushpizin, and we say it and we sing it. You know what? It's a nice thing. It gives the mitzvah a bit of time, and so on and so forth, which is why I lay much of the emphasis on those mitzvot and those practical things in relation to which the Zohar created a revolution, in fact. And so on that note, I'm going to wish everybody a Zot Chanukah Sameach, Besorot Tovot as always. I am flying this week in Yirtzeh Hashem, though there'll be a shiur on Shabbat, and then I'll be back, hopefully, all being well, at the beginning of March, and the week I come back, we'll start a new world, again, which I'm very excited about, the world of the Tshuvot, the world of the rabbinic responsa, and hopefully it will be something that you will find of interest and as fascinating and compelling as I have done after having studied it for many years and continuing to study the world of the Tshuvot. So that's it.
Thank you.
It
Thank you
just
so much.
remains
Toda rabba.
my pleasure. Thank you for joining and being such consistent participants in the shiur, and I look forward to many more in good health above all. And
Amen.
bracha, Yeshuot and Nechamot for Am Yisrael Bichlal. Bye for now, everybody. Erev Tov.
Erev
Erev
Tov.
tov.
Thank
Kol
you
Tov.
very much.
My pleasure.
Toda
Kol
rabba. Toda rabba.